Well, yesterday we discussed about karma in relation to the all-soul, the universal soul. And then we said that there is a universal soul, the spirit, the self, which really plans the whole thing, the whole world movement, small and big. And in that movement, it utilizes the individual for its own purpose. And as I said about the example, with an example of an architect, the mason doesn't know the plan. He only does his work. He has not revealed the plan. So he should not think that what I have done, I do not know if it will be of any help or any use. But whatever the mason does, it goes to the construction of the beams, of the roof, of the wall, of the windows. And then slowly the building is made. So similarly, when this all-soul is working through each one of us, we do not know the plan. But we are in the hands of a universal soul. But in this context, what happens? You see, whatever the individual does, it has an effect on the family, what he has called here the karma of the family. So, in a way, if you have noted yesterday, he has used three terms: karma of the family, karma of the nation, and then he says it's karma of the race or humanity. So he doesn't speak about the other internal religious factors or little communities, nothing. So there is the individual, there's the family, there's the smallest unit, then there is the nation, then there is humanity. So these are the three steps of evolution. And all the other steps in between, we have societies, communities, etc. They are there more as development towards the nation's soul. So what we understand is the truth of the family. It is like the brick of a house. Each family is like a brick. And on the strength of the brick is the strength of the building. So he doesn't say, for example, the wall could be a community, but the wall depends on the bricks. So brick is the family. So the foundation of humanity or of nation is the family. And that is why I gave you the example yesterday that we had this system of the family, the joint family. Its problems were there, but that is a concrete, solid brick. But today, that family is getting broken. In the West, there's hardly anything. Of course, there are, what we say, atomic families, husband, wife and children, nothing more. But the whole concept of family has gone to the winds. So that is where the destabilization has begun, because the family is broken. But then does it mean that the family that we have had is going to be the future also the same way? Do I stick to my Vedre Ananda Reddy? Do I say Kumbham Ananda Reddy or something? But this breaking up of the family, maybe it is an indication of a different kind of family that needs to be built in the future. Not based upon our little, inheritance or my little village, In Tamil Nadu, as I told you, in Andhra Pradesh, we have the whole names of the village itself as part of my family. I call J. Ananda Reddy, that means Julur Ananda Reddy. Julur is my village. So most of these Andhra names, if you might have seen in the newspapers, there's always the town or the village they belong to. So that's the family. But if it is broken down, there is a meaning that the future families is not based on your blood relationship or your little villages and all that. It would be a family of the commonness of idea. That's why we call ourselves a family. We are not blood related. But that sense of the family of belonging to Mother and Sri Aurobindo, based on an ideal and an idea, is much stronger, is much more healthy. You see, in a normal hierarchical family, there was always the domination, there was so much of disturbance, there was so much of suppression of the women and all that. But in this new family, when we call ourselves children of the Mother, immediately you see the bondage is higher, more intense, and there's equality. There's nobody trying to dominate and oppress the others. So this new family is going to be the shape of the family in the future society. Then he calls it as the karma of the nation, because nation is the next biggest block. I mean, say if brick has been the family, the building is the nation. And then these buildings make up the city. So that city we can compare with humanity or mankind. You see, that is why these are the three main steps of social growth. In between villages and towns and all that, those are not of much relevance. They keep changing. Every time we can have small villages, they keep changing. It's not of really permanent value. The permanent value is the family, the nation. And after nation, because why do we halt a nation? Because nation is a conglomeration of all these efforts of these families on social, spiritual, aesthetic, religious aspects. It is when all this come together, the nation comes up, and that is why we call the nation soul. I explained to you yesterday. So that is the highest human block till now. But when Sri Aurobindo speaks of the mankind, that is the third step of Vishnu that we have had in our story. He wants 3 steps, and the third step of Vishnu is the mankind. That means that is the one comprehensive, largest family of mankind. So we have to see what Sri Aurobindo is speaking about these 3 steps. Then we come to the new para. But we can see when we look into ourselves that this relation of the individual to the whole has a different significance. It does not mean that I have no existence except as a more or less protracted moment in the cosmic becoming of the All-Soul. That too is only a superficial appearance, and much subtler and greater is the truth of my being. For the original and eternal reality, the Alpha and the Omega, the Godhead is neither separate in the individual, nor is he only and solely a pantheos, a cosmic spirit. Now he is bringing an explanation of the true individual. Because yesterday we said, if there is only the all-soul, the universal soul, it is as if the individual is a pawn. He is being used. But Sri Aurobindo says, no, he is not being used. Because here the architect employs a mason and he just uses them. After 6 months, he is kicked out. So the mason has no name. He has no entity. But here, in the human factor, it says the human individual and the universal soul have a different relation. Because here the thing is, he says, it is the Godhead is neither separate in the individual, nor is he only and solely a creative, a cosmic spirit. So this cosmic, the universal spirit or self and the indwelling Godhead, they are both one and the same. Whereas in the example I gave you of the architect and the mason, they are two different individuals. One has the dominance of the plan, the other one is used for the purpose. But here in humanity, in the soul, that universal soul is the same as this indwelling soul within. So it says this individual is not being used. On the contrary, he is expressing the universal will. And the only thing is, now, like the mason, I didn't know the divine plan. The mason doesn't know the plan of the architect, nor do I know today, because I'm not conscious of my soul. He would tell us subsequently, He says he is at once the eternal and individual. He is at once the eternal individual and the eternal all-soul of this and many universes, and at the same time he is much more than these things. So this universal soul is also the indwelling soul, but these are not only the only two phases. We know very well by now that there is a transcendent phase also. So that is why he says that universal soul is much more. So that much more is the transcendental self. This universe might end, but he would still be. And you see the next sentence. And I too, though the universe might end, could still exist in him. And all these eternal souls would still exist in him. This is what is important. That this universe, this manifestation could be abrogated, could be withdrawn, come to an end. There could be a pralaya. But what would survive this pralaya is the soul within me and the universal soul. And that could be the secret of this pralayas, that the external manifestation of the divine is withdrawn. But the individual souls, we are not killed, or really we are not withdrawn, because the individual is an eternal truth of the transcendent. We have seen in the life divine that is a major philosophical difference between Shankaracharya and Sri Aurobindo. That these individuals are not creations, they are the inherent part and parcel of the transcendent. It is only, like I say, the blood cells are part of my body. I cannot say these blood cells and my body are separate. What is running in my veins is part and parcel of what I call the body. It's only when I get a cut, maybe that blood comes out and I say, oh, these are my blood cells. But otherwise, it is one and the same. Similarly, we, the individual souls, are the absolute, indispensable, inseparable part of the transcendent. That is why he says, even if the whole universe might end, but he will remain and I will remain, because all these eternal souls would still exist in him. But as his being is forever, so the succession of his creations too is forever. If one creation were to come to an end, it would be only that another might begin, and the new would carry on with a fresh commencement and initiation the possibility that had not been worked out in the old, for there can be no end to the self-manifestation of the infinite. So what we often quoted about what Sri Aurobindo said, that this is not the first time that mankind is being experienced. There have been 1,000,000 times before. This is not that there are 1,000,000 pralayas, but this experiment of man. Man, maybe this was a different form, different color, different shape. But this individual soul, as a human being, were always there. Because it says, whatever happens, the manifestation of the eternal, of the infinite is eternal. So we speak about 7 pralayas, we speak of the 8th creation, but this time, as we said often, there won't be a pralaya as such, there won't be a cosmic destruction, because she said this 8th creation is there to stay. But it is there to stay, but it is going to have an internal transformation. Previously, when it could not be changed or transformed, the divine had to withdraw and recreate another creation. And then he puts it beautifully here, that with a fresh commencement and initiation, the possibility that had not been worked out in the old. So you see, each time there's a pralaya, because there's something the divine wanted to manifest, and nature and creation could not take it. So even this time also, you see in those 2 great world wars, they were again those great points of resistance where humanity could not take what the Lord wanted, what the divine wanted. But I would now perhaps could say very clearly, because of their physical presence, the Mother and Sri Aurobindo, that the world escaped another pralaya, because they absorbed the asura that was trying to destroy. So because of this destruction, the world and the power that is there, we could save the world. But now saving is not enough. Change is necessary. If there is no change, it could be, Mother would say, there would be a pralaya, but not in the old sense. But a pralaya, the destruction of all that is resistant to the divine. So it could be communities, it could be individuals, it could be an earthquake, it could be a volcano, it could be any means that nature would adapt. But there would be destruction of the old. Old in the sense, what resists the new. It is not the old fashion, it is not the old thing. But if people are not open to the new changes, those people, wherever they are in the world, they would be destroyed. So that is the change. So he says here, Nasti anto vistarasya me. The universe finds itself in me. Even as I find myself in the universe, because we are this face, and that face of the one eternal reality, and individual being is as much needed as universal being to work out this manifestation. Well, we have seen Life Divine, chapter 5 and 6, how much the divine needs the individual, because it is through him that he expresses himself, that is fine. But the necessity of the individual, remember, according to the Life Divine, is not because he only manifests the universal, but because he aspires for going back to the divine. That is the raison d'etre of the individual. Otherwise, the animal also was manifesting the universal divine, and maybe much better than we do. So the manifestation of the individual animals and birds and trees and insects, everybody did. But the only difference between that individual and this human individual is that we are expected to aspire for the divine. That is why perhaps we have been created. Otherwise evolution could have very well stopped with a beautiful animal and a lion and a butterfly and a flower. But there wasn't a positive aspiration to return to the divine. And evolution has got to be returned to the divine. And in that movement, somebody has to take the lead. And then he said, humanity, I give you the responsibility to aspire. And that aspiration would hasten the process of the return. So it is in this aspiration that we are failing the divine. Otherwise, ours is, as we say, is an animal life. So aspiration minus, we are all nearer to animalhood, and we are only fulfilling the animal mentality, animal vitality. So apart from all the other physical differences that we can speak, it seems the only difference is, one of the major differences, we can speak, animals can't. They have their own language. We can communicate, they can also communicate. But according to what we have seen in the philosophy, the real difference is our prerogative to aspire for the divine. If that is lost, then as he gave us a big gali in the Life Divine, we are like creeping worms, in the first chapter, second chapter. So that's the first time that I saw Sri Aurobindo becoming so blunt about this humanity. So then we see the individual vision of things is as true as the universal vision. Both are ways of the self-seeing of the eternal. I may now see myself as a creature contained in the universe, but when I come to self-knowledge, I see too the universe to be a thing contained in myself. Subtly by implication in my individuality, amply in the great universalized self, I then become. You see, today I see myself as a creature contained in the universe. You see, today's evolution is as if I'm part of the universe. But tomorrow, when I have my self-knowledge, when I realize myself, psychic being. Then what would I say? I see too the universe to be a thing contained in myself. Today I am part of the universe, tomorrow the universe is part of me. So imagine that is the real realization. Until then, until I say, oh, I am part, you are a part, you are an individual. Individual means you are separated. But when you have the realization, so the universe is part of me. Because then you are not just body and flesh and name and form. Then you are the pure spirit, the psychic being, the soul. And the soul, when you realize the soul, there's oneness. Because the soul doesn't distinguish between you and me. Because there's only one soul. So then it says, the universe is part of me. And then, subtly by implication in my individuality, amply in the great universalized self, I then become. That is the experience of Sri Aurobindo in most of his sonnets. That is the universal me. You see, when he says, in me, there's a beautiful sentence, I forget the sense, where he sees the planets themselves as part of his consciousness. So that is the universalization of his consciousness, where all the planets are part of his being. That is why he can say, I suffer millions of times with humanity, because all the human suffering comes into me. And all the human joys also. So it's not this individual, it's not somebody sitting there in that little ashram room. His consciousness is wide, as wide as the universe. So he can claim to be that the things are contained in me. And these are data of an ancient experience, things known and voiced of old. Though they may seem shadowy and transcendental to the positive modern mind, which has long poured so minutely on outward things that it has become dazed and blind to any greater light, and is only slowly recovering the power to see through its folds. But they are for all that always valid and can be experienced today by any one of us who chooses to turn to the deepest way of the inner experience. So these experiences of the realization of the self, and when the self-realization is there, you see the world, the universe is me. He said, these are experiences of the old. All our great rishis, from the Vedic times to the present times, this is a thing that has been not done, experienced, practiced, and practicable by anyone, he says, who chooses to turn to the deepest ways of inner experience. But the modern mind, he says, the positive modern mind, which has long poured so minutely on outward things, it has become dazed and blind to any greater light. So you see, it's like somebody, you have read in that newspapers about that Australian family. For 10, 15, 18 years, the family was living in the cell. The children were born there, they didn't even see the sunlight. They just were used to see these lights. So when they came to the sunlight, in the days, they could not see the light. So this is the modern mind. It is there so minutely looking at the outward things, minute detail. But they have hardly ever lifted up their eyes to see the sunlight and the greater light. Their eyes so much on the atom, on this nuclear thing, on this small thing, that they cannot accept this higher light. But it says, if they turn to the deepest way of inner experience, they too can. In fact, thanks to some of the Western transpersonal psychology, they are admitting, not only they are admitting, they are now emphasizing that the experience of the mystics is much more real than what we thought is about the outer world, about the external world. So mysticism, which was supposed to be something, not dependable, so-called subjective, they say no, mystic experience is very valid, and this transpersonal psychology is now building up so much on this mystical experience, an experience which really belongs to the mystics, the saints and the rishis and the seers of India and the world. So world is moving towards the acceptance of this mystic experience. So that's what Sri Aurobindo is telling us. Modern thought and science, if we look at the new knowledge given us in its whole, do not contradict them, but only trace for us the outward effect and workings of these realities. For always we find in the end, the truth of self is not contradicted, but reproduced and made effectual here by law of energy and the law of matter. Well, that's almost a prophetic sentence. Modern thought and science, if we look at the new knowledge, of course, even in his time, what was the new knowledge? The knowledge of the atom. The highest that Sri Aurobindo had was the discovery of the atom in his times. So he says, look at the new knowledge given us in its whole, do not contradict them, do not contradict the mystic experience, but only trace for us the outward effect and workings of these realities. For always we find in the end the truth of self is not contradicted but reproduced, made effectual here by law of energy and law of matter. This is what is important to know. Energy and matter. Well, we know the equation now. E is equal to mc square. So that energy and matter also was discovered in Sri Aurobindo's time. So now what Sri Aurobindo is hinting at is, science has found that this matter is equivalent to energy. So, and then this energy, as we have seen, is equivalent to a consciousness. So he says basically this equation between energy and matter are moving in the right direction. And there won't be any contradiction with spirituality. There won't be a conflict between spirituality and science. We are moving in the right lines. Now he comes back to the question of rebirth. The necessity of rebirth, if we look at it from the outward side, from the side of energy and process, stands upon a persistent and insistent fact which supervenes always upon the generality of common law and kind and constitutes the most intimate secret of the wonder of existence, the uniqueness of the individual. And this uniqueness is everywhere, but appears as a subordinate factor only in the lower ranges of existence. Here is going to take us basically into the question of the uniqueness of the individual. Of course, we have been already given that idea before, that this individual is part of the universal. Now again he comes back to this question of the importance of the individual from the spiritual law, from the point of view of spiritual law. He says, this is the most intimate secret of the wonder of existence, the individual. Now why is this human being such a unique product of this creation? Now he'll explain that. It becomes more and more important and pronounced as we rise in the scale, enlarges in mind, gets to enormous proportions when we come to the things of the spirit. That would seem to indicate that the cause of this significant uniqueness is something bound up with the very nature of spirit. It is something it held in itself and is bringing out more and more as it emerges out of material nature into self-conscious. Now here I think we know this philosophy, that this individual soul, it was their part of matter. But that there in matter, it was not that kind of an entity, did not have this importance. But as it comes up in evolution through the animal, through the plant, and through when it comes to man, and then to the mental consciousness, it is the soul is revealing itself more and more. That means, as we said, when it comes to the man level, the soul becomes a psychic entity. That means it has got now a proper body and form and shape called the psychic entity. So that is what is linking up, that this uniqueness is something bound up with the very nature of spirit. That means that spirit which is hidden in matter, as it moves up in the scale of evolution, becomes much more important. Now, what is the idea behind that? That the laws of being are at bottom one for all of us, because all existence is one existence. One spirit, one self, one mind, one life, one energy or process is at work. One will and wisdom has planned or has evolved from itself the whole business of creation. Now let me put it this way, that the individual human being becomes important in the evolutionary process because it's for the first time that the spirit has gained a body, a recognition of its own. Up until now, the spirit was amorphous, it did not have a proper body. But in man, it becomes a psychic being. So the whole importance of this evolution is the more the spirit reveals itself, that rung of evolution becomes most important. Now, as we said, in matter, there wasn't a body of the spirit. In plant, no. In animal, no. In man, yes. For the first time. But now from here what we have to learn is, in the next evolutionary step, is a spirit which will become much more self-revealing. So it is not the question of having a body which is much more flexible or more powerful or more capable. That is why it has been argued, if science tomorrow brings about, by cloning, a fantastic body, no disease, beautiful, eternal youth, but the spirit is there, the soul is almost as small as the beginning, then that is not the evolution for Sri Aurobindo. So what science would do by cloning a wonderful person, taking the best of the genetics and combining them and says, this human being will have no disease henceforth, he will live 300 years. It has no value. The value is only when the spirit becomes, the spirit becomes more self-revelatory. That is the real process of evolution. So this is what we see here, that as it is all linked up with the spirit's self-revelation. And then he would say, and yet in this oneness, there is a persistent variety which we see first in the norm of a communal variation. Well, there is a sentence here which we did not read. He said, there is one spirit, one self, one mind, one life, one energy, etc. You see, as we go down the evolutionary process, we see one matter. There is hardly a variation, there are little different forms. Then there is oneness in the animal, there is a oneness in the plant. Of course, there is a variation. That's what is saying, that everywhere there is only one spirit, but the manifestation is aplenty. The forms, the variations are infinite. And he would say, there is everywhere a group energy, group life, group mind, and if soul is, then we have reason to believe that however elusive it may be to our seizing, there is a group soul which is a support and foundation. Some would call it the result of this communal variety. That gives us a ground for a group karma. So yesterday we dealt with the same aspect. He has come back to that, what we said, the group karma, the collective. So this is the collectivity. Now, what is a collectivity? It is not just a conglomeration of number of people. It is not 2,000 people or 1,500 people or maybe 3,000 people in Auroville that makes a collectivity. A collectivity must have what it says, a group life, a group mind and a group energy. We could say yes, in the ashram perhaps we do see this kind of a group life. We have common meditations, we have physical education, we have the common eating place and common this thing. There's a group life, there's a group energy. I don't know how much we can say there's a group mind. But there is something called group aspiration. But this is where we have to see, because long back in the 60s sometimes Mother had almost complained to say that ashram is not yet a collectivity. There are members, prosperity numbers, but beyond that, there wasn't a group soul. So in the end he says, there's got to be a kind of a group soul, and a group soul which is formed out of a group aspiration. And then on the external level also there's a group energy. Why do you say there should be a collectivity of work, a collective living? So not only there's an aspiration, but there's externally also, we must work together, we must eat together, we must meditate together. There's a kind of a group energy that is created. So that has got to be, otherwise everybody's sitting in their little corner saying, so, no, I'll do meditation at home, I'll do my research at home, I'll do that. It doesn't help. And one of the best things for this group energy I've seen is a physical education. Because there it is matter, physical matter. You're playing, you're running, you're doing swimming. And there it is the physical matter which is acting. So on the material level, this group energy is most concrete. Because the moment we have a kind of a class, an assembly, then our minds flirt too much. We cannot be together in our group thinking. But in group action, if you're all playing basketball, we have got to be together. If half of us are playing cricket, we have got to be together. So automatically this physical education brings in the sense of the group energy, much easier than in any other activity. But ultimately it says, we have got to have this group life, a group soul, group aspiration. And then that is what brings us to group karma. So, whatever we do in this group life, we are forming our own group karma. If we are hiding corruption, if we are hiding ill will, if we are hiding bad things, so that is the group karma. This is somebody who may say, Krishnati may say, well, better I am in the international guest house, I don't know anything about the ashram, I am running my international guest house properly. But she is not alone. If the ashram community and the society community and this Auroville community were supposed to be the Aurobindo community here, if there is majorly this kind of a disease that is going on, then everyone will catch it. So that is the group karma. We cannot say, no, I have not done anything, I am pretty clean, so the wave of karma will not touch me. It's not that. The group karma embraces, involves everyone. You see, typically, I remember this when you say group karma, this is very, very special and typical of Indians, that until the problem comes to my doorstep, I never bother about others. I mean, that reminds me of my own Auroville days. There are lots of problems. When we wanted to have kind of a group sense, group energy, there was some disturbance at that time when I was there. But some of the great Indian families said, no, hum to theek hai, it doesn't bother me, aap Anand bhai jo karna karo. And 6 months later, the same thing, he attacked their family. So this isolation doesn't help, because once a karmic activity begins, then it involves everyone. So that is where either we are together and fight together and resist together, or we sing together. So that is the group karma. For the group, our collective soul renews and prolongs itself, and in man at least develops its nature and experience from generation to generation. And who knows whether when one form of it is disintegrated, community or nation, it may not wait for and assume other forms in which its will of being, its type of nature and mentality, its attempt of experience is carried forward, migrates, one might almost say, into newborn collective bodies in other ages or cycles. We were discussing this even in the previous paragraph. that what all we do, that it could be that we get these reactions or rewards even after many years, many decades, many ages. In fact, again I remember the same example of Germany. The Sri Aurobindo mentioned there that sometimes the nation soul withdraws, letting the body live or die. So that is where a nation gets into tremendous problems. And then when India, for example, itself, during this British period and all the conquest period, the mother, the nation soul had withdrawn. Because you see what happened, this is what is really important, that we have to receive, we have to be open to this nation soul. Otherwise, if we really quarrel amongst ourselves, fight amongst ourselves, there's a religious problem, this is caste problems and creed problems, the nation soul withdraws. Because there she sees that they are not responding to me. And it withdraws and it waits. And it waits for other ages, other cycles, other collective bodies. So that is why sometimes, these great civilizations of the past have vanished. Because the soul, soul itself withdraws and lets the body die. But fortunately, our Indian soul, nation soul, has never withdrawn completely. It was dormant, it was passive. But it's with this revolution, this movement of independence, that it was reawakened. And for the reawakening of the Bharat Mata had to come these people. Because this movement of independence is not just a question of gaining back the freedom of the country. It was reawakening the Mother India. And then Sri Aurobindo would say, now the country, the mother has reawakened, she has come forward. So then once she comes forward, she takes reins for progress. So then it is she who outs the foreigner. It is not we, it is not our activity, it is not our satyagrahas that help. Those are the outer examples. But the real thing is, she comes forward. She moves the people. And that movement of the people is what Sri Aurobindo wanted through his 5 years period of revolution in Bengal. He did not want to work toward the end. But he says, once I move the tsunami, then it will do the work in itself. So it was in 1910, he said, India will be free. Because he could see the tsunami, and that is where he awakened the Bharat Mata. And that was my work. Not to really to see 15th of August 1947. But because he was the first one to have awakened, with the kind of, that famous Durga Stotra that he has written, invoking the mother. His is not just a poesy, it's not just a poem. What he wrote was really the Durga, the mother, had to be awakened. And once she was awakened, he says, now I'll go to my next step. It's for her to see. So this is where we see this question of one person, and who knows whether when one form of it is disintegrated, community or nation, it will not wait for and assume other forms in which it will be its will of being, its attempt of experience is carried forward. One might almost say into newborn collective bodies in other ages or cycles. So this is how our Mother India awoke, and it happened same thing in Germany. It had withdrawn for a while, and then when it takes up a new form, for example, Egypt is there. It had withdrawn. By the time it came back, is no more the Egypt of old. It is a completely modernized body. So maybe that soul itself wants a new body. But there are cultures like ours and China and all this, where the old is transformed. But when the mother is withdrawn, when the mother withdraws, then the body becomes sick, weak. Then come the foreigners. Not because India was weak, but we became recalcitrant. We became, lethargic. And then there's a withdrawal for a period. And then, as we said, in the hour of God, then things are, let loose, things happen by themselves, by the human effort. That clashes. So now coming back here, mankind itself has a separate collective soul and collective existence. And on that community, the community of karma is founded. The action and development of the whole produces consequence of karma and experience for the individual, and the totality, even as the action and development of the individual produces consequences and experiences for others, for the group, for the soul, for the whole. Well, we get that point. You see, what the collective goes through, it has an effect on the individual. Because imagine that we are all caught up in a community warfare. I mean, it has happened in Gujarat, it happens very often in Hyderabad. If you are caught in that, what happens? You become part of the conflagration. You may not want it, but some bullet may hit you. You become part of the collective karma. But at the same time, what I do individually, as I said, we are like the brick. What I do individually will have its own effect on my family first, on the nation next, and maybe in the future on the humanity. So there is a kind of a karmic effect, reciprocal. The individual on the collective on the individual. And the individual is there. You cannot reduce him to a nullity or an illusion. He is real, alive, unique. You see how much it stresses. That is real, alive, unique. So it's not that we should overlook this individual saying, oh no, it's the all soul, which is the Brahman, which is doing everything. We have nothing to do. This is not that kind of a pacifist philosophy saying, oh no, God is doing, that's another big danger. Oh, God is doing everything, why should we act? I mean, we come to say, oh, but prayer karo, chala jayega, Mataji karege. We are a reality, we are unique. You are alive. You see, prayer is a fine thing. But there are moments when the nation has to act. And that is what Sri Aurobindo taught us in the time of the revolution. We have to act, sacrifice. So this is why he says, we are a reality. So who knows the universal itself is wanting you to act for its own purpose. To be passive and to say, no, we'll just pray in a corner, unless we have that kind of a high consciousness where we can pull down, invoke, as Sri Aurobindo did, the great force. We are in our little capacities, small Arjunas. We think of the divine, we lay ourselves in his hands, we surrender to her, and with whatever highest buddhi I have at this moment, I act. But those are the moments of action, so he says, we cannot be driven to a nullity or an illusion and saying we are non-important. Individual is not non-important. He is as much important. The communal soul variation mounts up from the rest, exceeds, brings in or brings out something more, something new, adds novel powers in the evolution. The individual mounts and exceeds in the same way from the community. It is in him, on the highest heights, that we get the flame crest of self-manifestation by which the one finds himself in nature. Well, as we know, this is the balance that is there in Sri Aurobindo between community, the collectivity and the individual. So he said the communal soul variation mounts up from the rest, exceeds, brings in or brings out something more, something new. You see, of course, it should be connected to the next one. The individual mounts and exceeds in the same way from the community. So it's kind of, the community imparts something new to the individual, and the individual by his own efforts imparts something new to the community. So there is a kind of a circular movement. We are inseparable, because the universal, the collective is expressing through the body, through the individual, and the individual, for example, going back to our own example of the body. I have the heart, we have lungs, we have this different kidneys, all these things. So these are the individual organs, if we say. So, if the general body is healthy, we do exercises, we have the proper diet, we have the proper things, then all the organs are healthy. But if one organ becomes sick, the whole body becomes sick. So similarly, they have both an effect. If I do something for the whole body, all the organs are good. And if each organ is good, then the whole body is good. So there is a completely inseparable this kind of influence upon each other. And lastly, I would say, it is in him, in the individual, on his highest heights, that we get the flame crest of self-manifestation by which the one finds himself in nature. So when the individual really evolves to his highest self, highest spiritual heights, there he finds the Supreme One manifesting in himself through the individual in nature. So in fact, to conclude, the role of the individual is to bring down the message of the divine to the collective. And the collective manifests it. It takes time. So always individual is the avant-garde in every movement, spirituality or religion or ethics or literature or revolution. Having said that, we see in the next paragraph, which we will take up later, now how the question of the collective and the individual translates itself on the level of birth. This we have seen more on the philosophic level, psychological level, but now we'll come down to the question of the birth and rebirth. What is the relation between rebirth and this question of this karma, the collective and the individual? So we have here 2.5 pages or maybe 3 pages, which I'll keep for tomorrow.